Hello, Professor. So I chose the Grimshaw versus Ford Motor Company case. This case is an example of a personal injury tort case. Ford being the defendant, they neglected people's safety, and they put them in harm when designing the Ford Pinto, which resulted ultimately in injury and death. A little bit about the case. The parties involved: Richard Grimshaw, who was a minor, and Carmen Gray were the plaintiffs, and Ford was the defendant. The plaintiffs were suing the defendant for poor safety design of the Ford Pinto. The date of the incident when the accident occurred, was May 28th, 1972. The case took place in Orange County, California in 1978 and was affirmed by a California appellate court in 1981. A little bit of background. A background on the Ford Pinto was first released in 1971. The year of the Ford Pinto that was involved in the accident was 1972. The model that was involved in the accident, when the accident first happened, the car first malfunctioned, and then another vehicle came from behind and slammed into the Ford Pinto, causing the fuel tank to go up into the passenger compartment and causing a giant explosion. Miss Gray, the driver of the Pinto, and Richard Grimshaw were the only people at the time in the car at the accident. However, they suffered a lot of injuries, and Miss Gray later died a couple of days later due to those injuries. And I will get into a little bit more detail about those injuries later. So a little bit about the Ford Pinto. When they first designed it, it was kind of a rush project. The plan was to create the Ford Pinto around or underneath 2,000 pounds and also sell it for $2,000. So they wanted to make a budget car essentially. And when they were doing that, what they did, which was kind of abnormal compared to other subcompact cars, is for the most part, some subcompact cars would have the fuel tank above the rear axle. In the Ford Pinto's case, it was behind the rear axle for some reason. They wanted to go that route, and that would be making the Ford Pinto the only car that to actually do that. And when they did that, they gave up a lot of rear space for that, and gave up a lot of crash space, and only had a limited of crash space of 9 to 10 inches, which was not enough. Which wasn't enough space if the car was to come from behind and rear end it. So that was not good already. They performed several crash tests on the Ford Pinto with that, and each time they performed crash tests at 20 miles per hour and 30 miles per hour, the Ford Pinto did not meet the requirements to pass the test. And what actually happened every time they performed the crash test, the same result happened. The fuel tank would go into the front of the car, puncturing the gas tank and causing an explosion to the car. After they figured out what was happening, they came up with numerous solutions to fix the issue. Protective bladders, covering the fuel tank, a tank inside of a tank to protect the fuel tank even more. Increasing the rear, reinforcing the rear end to make sure that if the car was rear-ended, that it would withhold. They made a lot of things. They suggested a lot of things, and in these product review meetings that they had, a lot of these fixes that they could implement were fairly inexpensive. However, each time they had a meeting, they never passed any of those or decided to go with those. Eventually, the Ford Pinto went into manufacturing, and with knowing the defect of the fuel tank, and they decided to ignore it and not do anything about it. With that being said, going back to the incident with Miss Gray and Grimshaw, that's what happened in their accident. A Ford Galaxy, another Ford car, actually came from behind and rear-ended them, causing the fuel tank to go into the car and exploding the car. And Miss Gray suffered major injuries and a lot of burns, and a couple days later she did die from it due to those burns. Richard Grimshaw, the minor, he suffered a lot of burns, and for the next 10 years he had to undergo a lot of extensive surgery and reconstructive surgery, and he had to do that for the next 10 years just to kind of get his body right and get back get back up and going on his feet. With that being said, Grimshaw and the Grays sued Ford Motor Company and the others. Grimshaw sought punitive damages. The Grays also attempted to do the same as Grimshaw, but their complaint was denied. Then the case was split into two cases, Grimshaw's case being for theories of negligence and strict liability, and the Grays case went to the jury only on strict liability theory. Ultimately, the verdict, the jury awarded Grimshaw $2.8 million in compensatory damages and $125 million in punitive damages. The Grays got awarded $659,680 in compensatory damages, and after that was awarded, Grimshaw and Grays' compensatory damages went down to Grimshaw's went from 2.8 million to 2.5 million, and the Grays went from $659,000 to $559,000 after pursuant to stipulation that some previously received by plaintiffs from others should be deducted from the amounts that was awarded by the jury. Unfortunately, this all could have been prevented, and Ford was really negligent. They had a lot of solutions to fix the problem and fix that fuel tank and ultimately redesign how it should be manufactured, but a lot of engineers and vice presidents, they all were blind to it, and they passed on and they signed off on it, letting the Ford Pinto go into actual design and be released to the public. That was definitely not okay, and Ford, like I said, was really negligent on that. I hope they learned their lesson, and it was not fair for Miss Gray to lose her life and Mr. Grimshaw to suffer severe injuries and ultimately affect his life for the rest of his life. Basically, he lost parts of his fingers and other things of his body that will make him disabled pretty much, and Ford had to pay for it. Or it was Ford's fault for doing that. So yeah, it was a really interesting case. I enjoyed reading it. It was really relevant to what we learned in our class, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoy this video and hope you enjoy my PowerPoint presentation on Grimshaw versus Ford. Thank you, Professor.